As we begin, please leave a comment liking this video if you haven't done so already. Thanks to everyone who does so. It really helps. Autumn wind howled through the broken windows of Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital as Sarah Martinez pulled into the empty parking lot. Her headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the imposing Victorian structure that had housed the mentally ill for over a century. Tonight would be her last shift here. The hospital was slated for demolition next month. Sarah had worked at Blackwood for 15 years, but she'd never seen it this desolate. The sprawling complex, once bustling with staff and patients, now stood like a monument to forgotten suffering. Only 3 patients remained, scheduled for transfer to other facilities in the morning. Her job was simple: keep them safe through one last night. The heavy oak doors groaned as she entered the main lobby. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling. The familiar smell of disinfectant mixed with something else, something musty and ancient that seemed to seep from the very walls. "Just 12 hours," Sarah whispered to herself, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. She made her way to the nurse's station on the 3rd floor, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. The elevator shuddered and groaned as it carried her upward. Through the metal grating, she glimpsed empty corridors lined with abandoned wheelchairs and gurneys. Blackwood had been scheduled for demolition next month, but standing here now, Sarah wondered if the building was already dying on its own. At the nurse's station, she found a manila folder containing the files of her 3 remaining charges. Marcus Chen, 34, diagnosed with severe dissociative disorder. Eleanor Whitman, 67, catatonic schizophrenia. And James Morrison, 28, treatment-resistant psychosis with violent tendencies. All had been patients here for years, all had histories of trauma, and all had participated in Dr. Blackwood's controversial experimental treatments. Dr. Blackwood, the hospital's founder and Sarah's predecessor by nearly 8 decades. His research into consciousness manipulation and memory reconstruction had been groundbreaking in the 1940s. But rumors of unethical experimentation had haunted the institution ever since. Sarah had always dismissed the stories as urban legends, but tonight, surrounded by shadows and silence, those legends felt uncomfortably real. The first hours passed quietly. Sarah made her rounds, checking on each patient. Marcus sat motionless in his room, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. Eleanor remained curled in her bed, lost in whatever internal world her fractured mind had created. James was heavily sedated, restrained after an incident earlier that week. But as midnight approached, the hospital began to change. It started with the lights. The fluorescent tubes in the hallway began flickering in sequence, creating a strobe effect that made the shadows dance. Sarah told herself it was just the old electrical system, but the pattern seemed almost deliberate, like a signal. Then came the sounds. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in vacant rooms, the soft scratch of fingernails against glass. Sarah tried to rationalize each noise, but her 15 years of experience could unexplain the voice that called her name from the abandoned surgical wing. Sarah, ... Sarah, help us, ... The voice was thin, desperate, and impossibly familiar. It sounded like Dr. Patricia Vance, a colleague who had died in a car accident 3 years ago. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped her flashlight, its beam barely penetrating the darkness that seemed to grow thicker with each passing hour. She decided to check on the patients again. Marcus was no longer in his room. The restraints lay empty on his bed, unbuckled from the inside. Sarah's heart raced as she searched the wing, calling his name. She found him in the day room, standing before a wall covered in faded photographs. Images of patients from decades past. Their eyes following her movement. "They're waiting," Marcus said without turning around. His voice was different now, older, carrying an accent Sarah didn't recognize. "They're waiting for someone to remember." "Marcus, you need to return to your room," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. But when he turned, his face wasn't quite right. The features were his, but the expression belonged to someone else entirely. "I'm not Marcus," he said with a sad smile. "I'm Dr. Blackwood. And you, my dear Sarah, are exactly where you need to be." Sarah backed away, her mind racing. Dissociative disorder could cause personality shifts, but this felt different. The knowledge in his eyes, the way he carried himself, it was as if someone else was wearing Marcus's body like a suit. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, Sarah heard movement throughout the hospital. Doors opening and closing, footsteps multiplying, voices whispering in languages she didn't understand. Her flashlight flickered and died, leaving her in absolute blackness. Emergency lighting suddenly blazed to life, revealing that the hospital had transformed. The walls were cleaner, the equipment newer. The decay and abandonment were gone, replaced by the sterile efficiency of a facility in full operation. But the staff and patients moving through the corridors weren't quite human. They were pale, translucent, their movements too fluid, their eyes reflecting light like mirrors. Sarah ran toward Eleanor's room, but found it occupied by a different patient. A young woman in a 1950s hospital gown, her head partially shaved, electrodes still attached to her skull. The woman looked up at Sarah with pleading eyes. "Don't let them finish the experiment," she whispered. "Don't let them take your memories like they took ours." The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The experimental treatments, the consciousness manipulation research, Dr. Blackwood hadn't been trying to cure mental illness. He'd been trying to transfer consciousness to achieve immortality by possessing his patients' bodies. And somehow, the process was still happening. She found James's room filled with surgical equipment that shouldn't exist. Modern computers displaying brain scans alongside antiquated devices that sparked with electrical current. James was strapped to a table, electrodes covering his shaved head, his eyes wide with terror. Standing over him was Eleanor, but not Eleanor. The elderly woman's body moved with the precision of a practiced surgeon, her hands working controls that seemed to bend reality itself. "The transfer is almost complete," Eleanor said in a voice that wasn't her own. "James will be the perfect host. Young, strong, and with a mind broken just enough to accept me completely." Sarah understood now. The hospital hadn't been abandoned. It had been transformed into a machine for harvesting souls. Every patient who had died here, every person who had suffered through Blackwood's experiments, was trapped in this liminal space between life and death. And Blackwood himself, the architect of this nightmare, had been jumping from body to body for decades, perfecting his technique. "You're going to stop this," Sarah said, surprising herself with her calm determination. She began disconnecting the electrodes from James's head, ignoring Eleanor's protests. "You don't understand," Eleanor hissed, but her voice was fragmenting, multiple personalities bleeding through. "I'm saving them, giving them purpose. Their suffering means something now." "Their suffering ends now," Sarah replied, pulling the main power cable from the wall. The machines went silent, but the hospital itself seemed to scream. The ghostly figures in the corridors turned toward her, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. They needed the experiment to continue, needed fresh bodies to inhabit, needed the cycle of possession to persist. Sarah helped James to his feet, supporting his weight as they stumbled toward the exit. Behind them, Eleanor's body collapsed as competing consciousnesses fought for control. The hospital's lights strobed wildly, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with malevolent life. They reached the stairwell as the building began to shake. Years of trapped souls were being released at once, and the psychic energy was tearing the hospital apart from the inside. Sarah and James half fell down 3 flights of stairs, the sound of shattering glass and crumbling masonry echoing behind them. The front doors burst open as they approached, revealing the pre-dawn light. Sarah had never been so grateful to see the sun. They collapsed on the hospital steps, gasping in the clean morning air, as Blackwood Psychiatric Hospital finally died behind them. But as the sun rose fully, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the parking lot, more cars had appeared overnight. Official vehicles, transfer vans, ambulances. The morning shift was arriving to collect the patients for transfer to other facilities. James gripped her arm with trembling fingers. "They don't know," he whispered, his voice hoarse but finally his own. "They don't know what they're walking into." As the medical personnel approached the hospital entrance, Sarah saw the truth in James's eyes. Some experiments never truly end. They just find new places to continue. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and subscribe.